Why was the rain always worse when everything depended on her? It hammered down like bullets against the tin roofs of Fort Braddock, Georgia. Lightning split the night sky and for an instant revealed armed silhouettes moving with surgical precision. They weren't defending the base. They were converging on it. From the observation tower, Lieutenant Olivia Reeves adjusted her scope, ignoring the cold water soaking through her uniform. Through the blur of rain, one figure stood out. A man clutching a detonator, 356 meters away. If he pressed his thumb, 35 NATO officials inside the command complex would be incinerated. Colonel Walsh's voice crackled in her ear. "Lieutenant, we're out of time. If you don't take the shot, everyone in that building dies." Her Barrett felt heavier than ever. The wind tore through the compound at 22 miles an hour, unpredictable, swirling between buildings. The rain made everything ghost-like, distorted. It was the kind of shot even veterans would call impossible. But Olivia had been raised in a family where impossible was just another word for untested. She steadied her heartbeat, 62 beats per minute. Her grandfather had taught her how to lower it, how to calm herself until even chaos bent to her will. She exhaled halfway. The terrorist's thumb hovered. The Barrett roared. For a second, the entire world compressed into a single line of flight, a single bullet cutting through wind and storm. Time slowed until it didn't. The detonator fell from lifeless fingers. "Target eliminated," Olivia reported, her voice steady. Nobody in that tower saw her flinch, saw the storm raging inside her. Nobody saw the 29-year-old woman behind the rifle, her eyes burning with something far deeper than duty. What they didn't know, what even she didn't fully realize yet, was that the 15 shots she had just fired that night would echo for decades. They would challenge institutions, shatter traditions, and awaken ghosts long buried. But those echoes had begun a long time ago. The first time Olivia touched a rifle, she was 6 years old. The Blue Ridge Mountains were covered in morning mist, the air sharp with pine and dew. Her grandfather, James Reeves, placed his weathered Remington Model 700 into her tiny hands. "Is it too heavy?" he asked. She shook her head. The weight felt right, as if the rifle had been waiting for her. "Remember," James said softly, "a rifle isn't just a weapon, it's a responsibility." She nodded, eyes fixed on a tin sitting 50 yards down a fence post. "Breathe easy, see your target become the bullet." She inhaled, exhaled halfway, squeezed. The tin exploded off the post. James Reeves, legendary sniper, Vietnam veteran, Distinguished Service Cross, gave her a single approving nod. From him, that nod was worth 1,000 words. "You've got it," he said, the Reeves eye. It was family legend, a gift that couldn't be taught. Her grandfather had it in Vietnam. Her father had it in Desert Storm. And now little Olivia had it too. By 12, she was a junior marksmanship champion. By 16, she could outshoot most military-trained snipers. But James always reminded her, talent was nothing without purpose. "The bullet goes where you send it," he'd say. "Make sure you're sending it somewhere that matters." The Reeves home was filled with medals, photographs, tactical manuals, and weapons from 3 generations of service. War wasn't a subject. It was the family business. But it wasn't glory James left her. It was burden. He carried nightmares from Vietnam. Her father carried his from the Gulf. And Olivia, she carried the weight of expectation. At 18, she enlisted. No one was surprised. But when she told her father her real goal, to one day join the Navy SEALs, he shook his head. "Impossible," he said. "Not cruel, not dismissive, just certain. Some doors stay closed, no matter how good you are." Olivia had nodded, the same quiet nod her grandfather once gave her. "We'll see." Her first deployment came sooner than she thought. Afghanistan, 2001. Her unit ambushed in a mountain pass outside Kandahar. Explosions, gunfire, men bleeding out. She wasn't even the designated sniper, but when she saw Taliban machine guns pinning her unit, she crawled into position with a borrowed M24. "You got one shot before they zero you," her sergeant hissed. "I'll need 3, she whispered back. 3 targets, 3 shots. Each man dropped in sequence. 437 meters, 512 meters, 680 meters. Perfect. Her captain stared at her afterward. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "Family tradition, sir." That firefight changed everything. From that day on, Olivia wasn't just another soldier. She became the unit's shadow, its unofficial marksman. By the time she rotated home, she had 17 confirmed kills. Every one of them earned in fire and smoke. The Army sent her to sniper school. She broke records that had stood for decades. Instructors skeptical at first became her fiercest advocates. Sergeant Major Phillips summed it up best. "Reeves isn't just good, she's once-in-a-generation good." And yet, even as her legend grew, so did the resistance. Beirut, Somalia, Yemen, everywhere she proved herself, commendations followed, but doors remained closed, not because of skill, because of tradition, because she wasn't what they expected a sniper to look like. At night, she returned to her family cabin in the Blue Ridge. The old logs creaked in the wind. After her grandfather died, she helped her father clean out his belongings. That's when she found it, the floorboard that didn't match, the hidden lockbox. Inside, journals, photographs, classified files. Operation Valkyrie. Her grandfather's handwriting, dated 1962. 14 women chosen, all exceptional marksmen, Pentagon skeptical, but unconventional approaches required. Photographs of women in fatigues, holding rifles with the same focus she'd seen in her own reflection. Names, mission reports, achievements erased from history. They had been real, they had served. They had killed for their country in shadows no man could enter. And then in 1973 the order came, erase them, erase everything. Her grandfather hadn't obeyed, he hid the truth instead. Olivia sat by the fireplace that night, journal pages trembling in her hands. "They erased them," she whispered. "They did everything men did and better, and they erased them." Her father stared at the fire. The military preserves tradition at all costs. James understood that, but he also understood that excellence deserves recognition. For the first time, Olivia realized her fight wasn't just personal. It wasn't about her. It was about every woman who had been told impossible and forced to vanish. "I'm going to finish what they started," she said quietly. By 2003, she had built a record no one could ignore. Deployments, commendations, scores that defied statistics. Men in positions of power called her once in a lifetime. And yet, when she applied to SEAL training, the answer came back the same every time: rejected. Not because she wasn't strong enough, not because she wasn't skilled enough, but because her existence threatened the story they wanted to tell. That's when she overheard them, a meeting in an abandoned gas station, 2 officers speaking of Operation Sentinel, a brotherhood sworn to block integration, to bury women's roles forever, to erase men like her grandfather who defied orders to protect the truth. And when they spoke of permanent solutions, when they said her name, Olivia knew she had crossed a line. The night she fired those 15 shots at Fort Braddock, it wasn't just terrorists she killed. It was the silence. It was the lie. But she didn't know that yet. All she knew was that thunder cracked and rain poured and her scope showed her one more target. She exhaled, fired, and another man fell. Each shot pulled her deeper into a story older than her, bigger than her, more dangerous than she could imagine. And still, she whispered to herself between the thunder and the silence. The bullet goes where you send it. Make sure you're sending it somewhere that matters. Why did the rejection letter feel heavier than any rifle she had ever carried? The paper was thin, ordinary, just a few lines of text, But in those lines was a wall, cold, unmovable, built long before she was born. Candidate does not meet the physical requirements for SEAL operations. She had read the words 3 times, then folded the letter once, twice, into a square so tight it nearly cut her fingers. The room around her was silent, but inside her chest the storm raged louder than any battlefield. She had trained harder than anyone, outrun them, outshot them, outlasted them, and yet denied. Her father's voice came back to her from years before. Some doors stay closed, no matter how good you are. But this wasn't just a door. This was a lock welded shut by people who had never seen her shoot, never stood in the mud beside her, never felt the way a bullet becomes an extension of your will. She wasn't just fighting for herself, not anymore. She was fighting for the women in those photographs, women whose names were buried under classified stamps, women erased. The second rejection letter came months later, identical, as if the words were stamped from a machine. The third time she asked for something different, a face-to-face interview. To her surprise, they granted it. Captain Elizabeth Harlow's office was immaculate. Diplomas and commendations lined the walls, evidence of her own battles to carve a place in the Navy. Olivia stood at attention, hands steady, though her heart beat like a drum in her chest. "Your qualifications are impressive," Harlow said without looking up from the file. "Your shooting scores alone put you in the top percentile of current SEAL operators." Olivia waited for the but. It came quickly. "But this isn't about skill. It's about physical capability. The demands of SEAL operations require strength and endurance most women simply do not possess." "I've met every standard listed," Olivia replied. Her voice was even, but every word tasted of steel. "On paper, yes, but our analysis suggests those results may not translate to operational environments. Extended swims, heavy loadouts, combat fatigue, upper body endurance. With respect, Captain, those are assumptions. I've carried combat loads in the mountains of Afghanistan. I've gone 72 hours without rest in Yemen, operating under constant threat. My record is proof, not theory." Harlow sighed, finally raising her eyes. "You're not average, but policy isn't made for exceptions. Institutions change slowly, Lieutenant. The SEALs will be the last to open their doors." Olivia saluted, turned, left. On the steps outside Naval Special Warfare Command, she sat in silence. The Pacific wind stung her face, but the sting inside cut deeper. She had always believed skill was enough. That excellence would speak for itself. But now she understood. Excellence terrified them. That night during her run near Fort Braddock, she saw the black SUV. Government plates, too far from main roads. She followed her instincts into the shadows of an abandoned gas station. Through a broken window, she listened. Phase 1 of Sentinel is complete. The data shows 94% failure for female candidates, statistically insurmountable. The senators are pleased. Extremely. This will block integration for at least 5 years. By then, we'll all be retired. A pause, then another voice. "And the Reeves situation?" Olivia froze. "She's contained at Braddock. Rejection from SEAL training should discourage further attempts. If it doesn't, more permanent solutions may be necessary." Her blood went cold. The voices were calm, casual, talking about her life like it was a variable on a chart. The Brotherhood, she hadn't known what to call them until then. A network of officers, politicians, men with power who saw women like her as a threat to everything they wanted to protect. Not security, not the nation, but their version of tradition. She walked back to base under a moonless sky, the words echoing, permanent solutions. That night she couldn't sleep. Her grandfather's journal lay open on her desk. Truth matters, even when hidden. For the first time, she understood why he wrote it. The following weeks she trained harder than ever. Not for the army, not for the SEALs, not even for herself. She trained because she knew they were watching. She knew they wanted her to break, to fade away quietly, to prove them right. Colonel Hayes found her one evening, firing 3-round groups at 1,200 meters in crosswinds most shooters wouldn't dare attempt. "You're not practicing anymore," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. "You're preparing." Olivia kept her eyes in the scope. "For what?" "You'll know soon enough." Hayes had served with her grandfather in Vietnam. He had seen the same gift in James Reeves. And now, in Olivia, he saw something else, the refusal to let history repeat itself. He handed her a folded chart, ballistics for the Barrett M82A1. "Learn this, master it. The Barrett's changing long-range doctrine in the right hands, your hands, it's unstoppable." She studied the data late into the night. Wind drift, drag coefficients, supersonic drop. Every line was a challenge. Every line was possibility. The next morning she returned to the range. A steel plate 12 inches wide, 1,200 meters away. Rain in the air, wind gusting. 3 shots, 3 hits, dead center. Hayes only shook his head, whispering almost to himself. "In 40 years, I've never seen anyone shoot like you." But shooting was the easy part. The real weight was the silence. The Brotherhood moved in shadows, erasing files, burying names, rewriting history. And they weren't just trying to stop her. They were trying to erase the very idea of her. Late at night, when exhaustion settled in, she asked herself the question that haunted her most. What if they're right? What if no matter how perfect I am, they'll never let me in? The answer came not from her father's voice, nor from Hayes, nor even from the memory of her grandfather. It came from within, a quiet, stubborn certainty. "Then I'll stop asking, I'll make them see." She didn't yet know how, but she knew when the time came, her rifle would speak louder than any policy. And that time was closer than anyone imagined. Fort Braddock began preparing for the NATO summit. Special operators from across the world arrived, Rangers, SEALs, Delta, SAS, KSK. Men who lived in shadows, men who had seen wars most people couldn't name. And Olivia, assigned as their instructor in advanced marksmanship. The irony wasn't lost on her. She could teach them, but she could never join them. During one session, a British SAS captain watched her drop 5 rounds into a 900-meter target in a rain squall. "Bloody impressive," he said. "You'd be an asset to any special operations unit. Why aren't you with your special forces?" Before she could answer, an American officer spoke. "Different standards, different traditions." The Brit frowned. "Seems a waste of talent." Olivia said nothing, but inside the fire burned hotter. That night Colonel Hayes summoned her. Maps covered his desk, security protocols, guard rotations, contingency plans. "Something doesn't feel right," he said. "Changes in structure, shifting protocols, too much confusion." "You think there's a threat?" "I think if someone wanted to strike at NATO's special operations, this summit would be the perfect opportunity." He handed her a set of marked positions. "These are sniper angles. I want you covering the eastern approach. If something happens, you may be our last line of defense." Olivia stared at the map. The weight of it sank in. This wasn't training anymore. This was history pressing down on her shoulders. As she walked out of Hayes's office, the question returned, the one that had followed her since the first rejection letter. "What if I fail?" But this time, she whispered the answer aloud, her voice steady against the storm gathering in her chest. "Then I'll fail trying, but I won't fail silent." In less than 72 hours, the storm would break. And when it did, the echoes of her shots would carry further than she ever imagined. Why did the sirens sound wrong? Olivia was halfway across the parade ground when the alarm tore through Fort Braddock. It wasn't the normal blare of a drill. This was sharper, urgent, the kind that meant something had already gone wrong. Then came the first shots, Precise, disciplined, not the panicked rattle of defenders but the practiced cadence of men who had trained for this moment. She dropped behind the concrete base memorial, scanning the chaos. Figures in U.S. uniforms moved between buildings with military precision. They weren't reacting, they were advancing. Her radio crackled, taking fire at the command center. Barracks hit, multiple casualties. Where's our backup? Olivia's blood ran cold. These weren't outside infiltrators. They were inside. Men who knew the layout, the weak points, the chokeholds. She keyed her mic. Control, this is Reeves. Hostiles are wearing U.S. uniforms. Repeat, attackers disguised as American personnel. Colonel Hayes's voice answered, strained but steady. Reeves, get to the observation tower. We need eyes on the entire complex. The rain began again, heavy sheets that blurred vision, slicked the ground, and drowned sound. Olivia moved low and fast, instincts taking over. Every shadow was suspect. Every flash of movement could be enemy or ally. By the time she climbed the tower ladder, her heart was hammering but her face was stone. Inside, she found Colonel Crawford, the 72-year-old base historian, and Master Sergeant Jackson, the grizzled range officer. Their eyes were grim. Situation's critical, Crawford said without preamble. 15 confirmed hostiles, already 12 dead, 18 wounded. All comms with outside are cut. NATO delegation is trapped in the conference center. Olivia scanned the room. A weapon case sat open. Inside, gleaming under fluorescent light, was the Barrett M82A1, 50 caliber, heavy as sin. We need you, Crawford said, voice hard. 15 targets, 6 to 1,400 meters. Weather's deteriorating. You've got maybe 90 seconds between each before they reach critical positions. Her throat tightened. 15 shots, each one life or death. Each one weighted heavier than the last. She checked the Barrett scope, barrel, magazines. The recoil could break bones if handled wrong. The round itself was designed for material destruction, not delicate precision. But in her hands, it would have to do both. Target 1, Jackson said, handing her the tablet. Admin building roof, 847 meters. Overwatch on the evacuation route. Olivia laid prone, settled her cheek against the stock and breathed. Rain streaked across the glass. The wind shifted left, then right. She calculated, adjusted, exhaled halfway. The Barrett thundered. The target dropped instantly. Target 1 neutralized, she reported, already shifting. Target 2, Jackson called. Second-story logistics window, 1,227 meters, covering the LZ. Her world narrowed again. The chaos of gunfire, the screams, the storm, all faded. Only the scope remained. Only the math, the wind, the bullet. One breath, one squeeze. Target 2 down. And then the rhythm began. Target 3, a rooftop angle near the barracks, 1,100 meters. Down. Target 4, a moving figure near the motor pool carrying satchel charges, 800 meters. Down. With each shot, Olivia felt herself sinking deeper into the zone. That strange, fragile state where time slowed, her pulse faded, and the line between human and weapon blurred. But the enemy adapted. They began using cover, moving in pairs, staggering their exposures. Shots that should have been impossible became necessary. Target 9 required her to thread a bullet through a 12-inch gap between steel beams at nearly 1,400 meters. She steadied, calculated, fired. The man dropped. But it wasn't just the kill. Through the gap she caught sight of something else, a hidden door in the admin building wall, one not on any base map she'd studied. She filed the image away. Secrets within secrets. Targets 10 through 14, Jackson said, his voice tight. They've grouped up, covering each other, mutually overlapping fire. Olivia's chest ached with the weight of it. She would need to hit them in rapid sequence, faster than they could scatter, faster than they could vanish into cover. The rain pounded. Her hands were steady. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Each fell in a cascade of impossible precision. Only one remained. "He's fleeing east perimeter," Crawford said. "Looks like a detonator in hand." Olivia tracked him through her scope, running, rain slashing sideways. Distance, 356 meters, moving target, unpredictable wind. Lightning flashed, and in that instant she saw his face. Her stomach clenched. Captain Nathan Bradley, former SEAL instructor, the very man who had once scrawled her rejection note with the words, "Women have no place in combat." Her jaw tightened. This wasn't random, this wasn't coincidence. She forced the thought away. Breathe, focus. She tracked him, calculating the lead, the wind, the heartbeat. One breath, half release. The Barrett cracked. The round cut through the storm. Bradley collapsed, the detonator falling harmlessly to the mud. "All targets neutralized," Olivia reported. For a moment, silence. Then across the base, a roar of relief. Cheers, shouts. Men and women who had been cornered now realizing they were still alive. Olivia stayed prone, her cheek pressed against the rifle stock, the taste of metal and rain thick in her mouth. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't cheering. She was simply breathing, each inhale heavy with the truth that her 15 shots had not just ended an attack. They had ended an illusion. Because the faces of the dead were not strangers. They were American, decorated, men who had sworn oaths, worn uniforms, and chosen instead to betray. And among them, a man who once told her she would never belong. Lightning flashed again, washing the tower in white light. In that flash, the truth settled over her like the weight of the rifle in her arms. This wasn't over. The Brotherhood was real, and tonight she had made herself their enemy. Why was the silence heavier than the gunfire had been? Fort Braddock lay quiet now, the storm rolling east into the hills. Floodlights flickered against the wet pavement. Medics knelt over the wounded, stretchers moving back and forth. For the first time since the sirens, no shots echoed across the compound. Olivia sat alone in the observation tower, her rifle resting on the floor beside her. 15 empty casings lay scattered in front of her, brass still warm, steam curling in the night air. She counted them once, twice, 15. She pressed her palms against her eyes hard enough to see sparks. Her heartbeat slowed, but it didn't settle. Behind her eyelids the shots replayed, not the precision, not the mathematics, the faces, each man falling, each life extinguished. Jackson entered quietly. The sergeant said nothing at first. He simply crouched, gathering the casings one by one, dropping them into his hand like relics. "You saved the summit," he said finally. His gravel voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "Saved the whole damn alliance, truth be told." Olivia didn't look up. And yet, her voice was low, almost breaking. "I knew their faces, Bradley, Jenkins, all men who wore the same flag on their shoulders that I do." Jackson lowered himself onto the floor beside her. "They stopped wearing that flag the moment they chose betrayal. Don't put their ghosts on your shoulders." She gave a humorless laugh. Too late. For a long moment they sat in silence, rain dripping from the tower roof, wind rattling the metal. Then Jackson handed her the casings. "Keep them, proof of what you did here, proof of who you are." She closed her hand around the brass, the edges biting into her skin. It didn't feel like proof. It felt like weight. By morning, Pentagon investigators had arrived. The summit had been saved, but Fort Braddock was a graveyard of secrets. The official line was simple: rogue extremists disguised as U.S. personnel. The kind of story the press would accept, the public would nod at, and no one would question too hard. But Olivia knew the truth, and the truth was far more dangerous. In the debriefing room, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. 2 colonels and a man in a suit sat across from her, legal pads and recorders in front of them. She sat upright, hands folded, eyes steady. "Lieutenant Reeves," one colonel began, "your actions last night were remarkable. 15 hostile targets eliminated with surgical precision. NATO owes its safety to your performance." The man in the suit cleared his throat. "However, certain irregularities require clarification. For instance, your identification of Captain Nathan Bradley as a hostile. How did you recognize him at that distance, in poor weather conditions?" Olivia felt the trap in the question. She answered carefully. "Recognition came after the shot. I confirmed his identity when I closed distance with the body." The man's eyes narrowed. "So you did not, in fact, target him because of who he was?" "No, I targeted him because he carried a detonator that would have killed 35 NATO officials." A pause, the scribble of pens, the click of the recorder. The colonel leaned forward. "Lieutenant, understand that any implication of insider conspiracy would be destabilizing. The narrative we present to the public must be clear and contained. Do you understand?" Contained. The word clanged in her head like steel bars closing. "I understand, sir." The man in the suit smiled thinly. "Good. Then this debrief is concluded. You'll remain on restricted duty until the review board completes its evaluation. Dismissed." She rose, saluted, and walked out, but every step felt heavier, not because of fatigue, because of confirmation. They already knew, and they were already burying it. Back in her quarters, she unrolled her grandfather's journal again. The pages smelled of dust and pine and oil, as if they carried the mountain air inside them. She traced her finger over a line he had written decades ago. "They will silence us not with bullets, but with erasure." She closed the journal, eyes burning. He had been right. The Brotherhood wasn't a ghost story. It was alive, and now it had seen her. That night she dreamt of the women in the photographs, not as images but as presences. Faces she had never met, eyes she had never looked into, standing in the midst of her dreams, rifles across their chests, silent, watching, waiting. She woke with her heart pounding. The casings lay on her nightstand, 15 small suns glinting in the moonlight. She reached out and touched them, one by one. Each was a question, each was a price. The next morning she stepped outside. Soldiers moved like ghosts across the compound, cleaning debris, repairing walls, painting over scars. Everything looked normal. Everything was not. A voice called her name. Colonel Hayes stood by the flagpole, coat collar turned up against the wind. His face was drawn, but his eyes were sharp. "You're not safe here anymore," he said without greeting. She stopped cold. "What do you mean?" "You embarrassed them, exposed them. Not fully, not publicly, but enough. Bradley was one of theirs, the others too. You proved the conspiracy's real, and now you're marked." She swallowed. "Then what do I do?" Hayes leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You keep moving, you keep watching, and you keep shooting straighter than they ever imagined possible, because sooner or later they'll try again, and when they do, you'll be ready." Olivia wanted to believe him, but as she looked out across the parade ground, at the repaired walls, the painted-over bullet holes, she felt the weight again. The silence. The knowledge that institutions had erased whole generations before her, and they would try again. Yet beneath the weight, something else stirred, something deeper. Hope. Because if they feared her enough to erase her, it meant she was already rewriting the story. That night, as the wind howled through the base, she whispered into the dark. "You can erase names. You can bury history, but you cannot stop the bullet once it leaves the barrel." And she knew then, with absolute certainty, this was only the beginning. Why did they send her? That was the first question Olivia asked herself when her orders came in. Deployment to Corvash province, northern Syria. Officially, she was to support a joint NATO strike team clearing a suspected weapons facility. Unofficially, everyone knew the mission was dangerous, rushed, and underprepared. Her gut twisted when she saw the assignment packet. Too little intel, Too few support assets. Too much risk for a single lieutenant whose name had only just left the debriefing room at Fort Braddock. But she didn't argue. Arguing wouldn't change anything, and maybe that was the point. 2 weeks later, the Black Hawk banked low over jagged cliffs, rotors chopping through hot desert wind. Olivia sat inside, Barrett case between her knees, helmet strapped, eyes on the horizon. Around her, the team checked weapons, adjusted straps, muttered to themselves. Most avoided her gaze. Captain Russo, team lead, finally spoke. "Rules are simple, Reeves. You're on overwatch. You stay up high out of the way. You cover us, nothing more." Olivia nodded. His tone carried no malice but no trust either. She had saved NATO leaders, and still, she was a ghost in her own military. The Black Hawk dropped them into dust and heat. Olivia climbed quickly, separating from the squad, moving toward a ridge that overlooked the compound below. The building was low concrete, windows bricked, perimeter walls scarred by old shelling. Too quiet. Through her scope, she studied shadows, angles, lines of sight. Something was wrong. The silence wasn't emptiness. It was waiting. "Overwatch in position," she whispered into comms. The squad advanced, boots crunching gravel. 20 meters from the gate, gunfire erupted. Automatic, concentrated. From rooftops, alleys, hidden slits in the wall. The squad dove for cover, pinned instantly. "Contact, heavy fire north wall," Russo shouted. Olivia had already zeroed the first shooter. Crack, down, shift, crack, another fell. She moved faster than thought, each round clearing space for the squad. But then her radio hissed with static. A different voice, calm, deliberate. "Reeves, you shouldn't be here." Her blood ran cold. She checked her channel. It was secure, encrypted. No one outside their network should be able to cut in. The voice continued. "We warned you. Fort Braddock was your chance to step aside. Now you've chosen." She forced herself back to the scope. Another target, down, another, down. The voice chuckled. "You won't make it out of Corvash alive, and when you fall it will look like failure, not betrayal." She ripped the earpiece out, chest tight. The Brotherhood reaching even here. "Overwatch status," Russo barked. "I'm here," she snapped, shoving the fear down. She scanned, fired, cleared. The fight dragged 30 minutes, then 40. Dust thickened, the sun sank lower, and the squad finally breached the compound. Olivia followed from above, descending into shadow, rifle across her chest. Inside, the air stank of oil and damp stone. Crates stacked high. Mortars, rockets, boxes of ammunition, and something worse. Explosives wired together, red lights blinking. "Trap," Olivia shouted too late. The first blast tore through the eastern wall. Concrete rained down. Men staggered, some screaming, some silent. The second blast followed, and the building groaned, half collapsing. She dragged a corporal out from under debris, blood streaking her arms. Smoke choked her lungs. Russo limped toward her, eyes wide. "They knew we were coming." And Olivia understood. The Brotherhood hadn't just warned her. They had led her here. Outside, more gunfire, reinforcements, dozens of militants converging. The squad was battered, broken, half-strength. Olivia grabbed her Barrett. "Get them to cover. I'll hold the ridge." Russo stared at her like she was insane. "That's suicide." She didn't answer, she just ran. Back on the ridge, she lay prone, vision blurring from smoke and dust. Through the scope, militants swarmed like ants, trucks with mounted guns, dozens at least. She exhaled, centered, fired. The Barrett kicked. A gunner fell, fired again. Another truck veered, again. Each shot slowed the tide, bought the squad seconds. Seconds to pull the wounded, seconds to regroup. But seconds weren't enough. Her scope caught movement, 3 militants flanking, climbing the ridge toward her. She swung, fired once, missed, too close now. She dropped the Barrett, drew her sidearm. The first man lunged, knife flashing. She parried, fired point blank. The second came, and she rolled, firing again. The third slammed into her, driving her down. His hands locked around her throat. Black spots danced in her vision. She clawed, gasped. Somewhere in the distance she heard shouts, her squad maybe, but they were fatting. And then memory, her grandfather's voice sharp as the crack of a shot. Breathe easy, see your target, become the bullet. She let go of panic, reached down, fingers closing on a jagged rock. She swung with all her strength. The man crumpled. Olivia lay there, chest heaving, throat raw. She rolled onto her knees, retrieved her Barrett, and staggered back into position. Her vision swam, but she steadied, fired again. When evac finally came, 2 hours later, the ridge was littered with bodies. The squad was bloodied but alive. And Olivia, her hands trembled, her throat bruised, her face pale, had kept them that way. On the flight back, Russo sat across from her. His expression was unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "You saved us. Don't know how, don't know why you fight the way you do, but you saved us." Olivia said nothing. She only stared at the desert below, knowing what he couldn't. This hadn't been about the squad. It hadn't even been about the mission. It had been about her. The Brotherhood had set the board, and they weren't finished. That night back at the forward base, she found her reflection in the cracked mirror of a washroom. Her throat was ringed with dark bruises. Her hands shook when she reached for the tap. For the first time since she was 6 years old, rifle in her hands, tin can on a fence post, she wondered if the gift was enough. If precision, endurance, defiance, any of it, was enough against an enemy that didn't fight on battlefields but in shadows, corridors, whispers. Her eyes burned. She gripped the sink until her knuckles whitened. "You can erase names," she whispered to herself, voice breaking, "but you can't erase truth." The mirror offered no answer, only her own face, determined, tired, alone. Why did the metal feel like a blade instead of an honor? The Pentagon auditorium was filled with uniforms, ribbons gleaming under bright lights, cameras clicking in the back rows. Olivia stood at attention on the stage as the Secretary of Defense pinned the Navy and Marine Corps medal to her chest. Words of valor echoed from the podium. Bravery in Syria, saving her unit, preventing catastrophic loss. The audience applauded. Generals nodded. A senator in the front row dabbed theatrically at his eyes. But Olivia's jaw was tight. She felt none of it because she knew what came next. When the ceremony ended, she barely had time to step off stage before the man in the gray suit appeared. The same man from the Fort Braddock debrief. Smooth smile, cold eyes. "Lieutenant Reeves," he said warmly, though his tone carried no warmth. "Congratulations, a medal well earned." She didn't answer. He walked beside her, hands in his pockets. "Enjoy the spotlight while you can. In a week the headlines will move on, and so will we." She stopped, looked at him square. "You staged that mission in Syria. You knew it was a trap." His smile didn't falter. "Proof, Lieutenant. Any evidence beyond your suspicions." Her silence was answer enough. He leaned closer, voice lowering. "You think you're a sniper, but this isn't a battlefield where you can see the target. This is Washington. Here, bullets are paper, kill shots are signatures. And you," he tapped her medal, the metal cold against her chest, "you've already been marked." Then he was gone, swallowed into the sea of uniforms and suits. That night in her temporary quarters near Arlington, she laid the medal on the desk beside her grandfather's journal. 2 artifacts from 2 wars, one fought in jungles, the other in shadows. Both left scars no medal could heal. She opened the journal again, seeking guidance. One line stared back at her. "Wars end when truth becomes undeniable. Until then, truth must survive." Her phone buzzed. An encrypted message, unsigned, just 5 words. "They are moving against you." The next morning proved it true. She walked into her commanding officer's office to find her record under review. Pages scattered across the desk, stamped with red ink. Fitness questioned, disciplinary concerns, psychological evaluation recommended. Her co's face was unreadable. Olivia, there are concerns, complaints filed, questions about your stability, whether the stress of combat has, he hesitated, compromised your judgment. She laughed bitterly. Complaints from who? Men who never left their offices. From officers of record, he said quietly, decorated ones. The Brotherhood, striking where rifles couldn't reach. By the end of the week she was grounded. No deployments, no weapons training, ordered to psychiatric evaluation. She sat in the sterile white office, across from a Navy psychiatrist whose eyes were kind but cautious. You've experienced significant trauma, he said gently. Fort Braddock, Syria. These things leave marks. It's natural to question, to doubt. I'm not broken, Olivia said flatly. He scribbled notes. Sometimes strength looks like denial. The real question is, what are you afraid will happen if you admit weakness? Her throat tightened, not from his question but from the thought behind it, because weakness wasn't her fear, erasure was. I can't afford weakness, she said finally. The sessions dragged on for weeks. Each one measured her words, her silences, her anger. Each one added to the file being built against her. At night she ran the streets of Arlington until her lungs burned. She shot at civilian ranges, paper targets shredded into nothing. She studied the journal, memorizing lines like scripture, but none of it silenced the gnawing truth. The Brotherhood wasn't just watching. They were dismantling her life piece by piece. One evening Colonel Hayes called. His voice was low, urgent. They're moving faster than I thought. I've seen the files. They're prepping for a full discharge, not honorable, not even medical. They want you gone, forgotten. Her chest tightened. So that's it, after everything. Not yet, Hayes said. Listen carefully. There's a Senator Markham, not Brotherhood. He served with your father once. He knows what's happening. He's agreed to meet, but it has to be quiet. No paper trail, tomorrow night. Parking garage under the old library annex. The line went dead. Olivia stood in her dark room, phone heavy in her hand, metal glinting in faint lamplight. She thought of Bradley's face, rain-streaked in her scope. She thought of Syria, the voice on her comms. She thought of her grandfather's words, truth must survive. The next night she walked into the dim parking garage, steps echoing. Shadows stretched long under buzzing lights. A figure emerged from the far side, a tall man in a civilian coat, silver hair, posture military. Lieutenant Reeves, he said. His voice carried the gravel of age, the edge of command. I knew your father, he was a good man. She nodded cautiously. You said you could help. I can do more than help. I can prove the Brotherhood exists. Documents, names, accounts. But they'll bury me before I can bring them forward. You, though, he studied her with sharp eyes, you have something they don't, credibility, and a gift they can't deny. Sniping doesn't change policy, Olivia said bitterly. No, Markham agreed. But courage does, and stories do, if you're willing to fight this war where bullets can't reach. Before she could answer, a screech of tires split the air. Black SUVs poured into the garage, doors flying open. Armed men spilled out, their movements precise. Too precise. Olivia's instincts screamed. She shoved Markham down as the first shots rang out, concrete sparking. She rolled behind a pillar, heart hammering. No Barrett now, no scope, just her sidearm and instincts. The Brotherhood hadn't waited. They had come for her here in the capital itself. Why did the garage feel like a tomb? Concrete pillars, flickering lights, the stale stench of oil and damp dust. Olivia crouched behind a support column, sidearm drawn, pulse thundering. Senator Markham was on the ground beside her, face pale, eyes wide. Gunfire cracked, ricocheting sparks off steel. The SUVs had boxed in every exit. Men in tactical gear moved with brutal precision, their rifles sweeping. These weren't thugs. They were trained. Brotherhood, Markham rasped. Olivia nodded once. Her throat was tight, but her voice was calm. Stay low, move only when I move. Her mind raced. 15 men, maybe more. She had one sidearm, 2 mags, no long rifle, no scope. Her sanctuary had always been distance. Tonight she had none. She steadied her breathing, remembered her grandfather's words, "The bullet goes where you send it, even when it's close." A shadow swept near. Olivia moved first. One round snapped into the man's chest plate. He staggered back. She shifted, firing again. This one found his throat. He collapsed silently. Shouts erupted, boots pounded. "Flank her, don't let her reach the stairwell." Olivia yanked Markham by the collar, pulling him toward the next column. Bullets chewed the concrete where he had just been. She fired blindly to cover the movement, sparks showering. They crouched behind a sedan, glass shattered in bursts as rounds tore through. The senator clutched his briefcase tight, knuckles white. "They want the documents," he gasped. "That's what this is about." "Then we don't let them have them," Olivia said, scanning under the car. Boots advanced. She aimed low, squeezed twice. 2 men went down screaming, their legs shredded. But more came, too many. She knew then this wasn't an arrest. It was an execution. "Stay here," she told Markham. "What are you?" She didn't let him finish. She sprinted left, drawing fire, rolling behind another pillar. Pain seared her shoulder graze. She gritted her teeth, ignoring it. From this angle she saw the SUVs. Their engines idling, back doors open. Inside, black cases, heavy, not extraction gear, body disposal. They didn't plan for her to walk out alive. Her anger burned hotter than fear. She slammed a fresh mag into her sidearm, checked her corner, then moved again. Quick, brutal, efficient. She wasn't a sniper here. She was a ghost with teeth. One man came close, rifle up. She slammed his barrel aside, drove her elbow into his throat, then fired point-blank into his visor. Another lunged from the right. She dropped low, swept his legs, then put a round in his chest before he hit the floor. Her lungs burned, her shoulders screamed, but she kept moving. Each second she stayed alive was one more the Brotherhood lost. Across the garage, Markham crawled toward her. He dragged himself into cover beside her, coughing. His briefcase had sprung open. Papers spilled across the concrete. Olivia's eyes caught a glimpse before he snatched them back. Names, dates, signatures. Real, irrefutable. "They'll kill us both," he said hoarsely. "But if even one page gets out, everything changes." A flashbang clattered across the floor. Olivia grabbed Markham, yanking him down. The blast rocked the garage, ears ringing, vision blurring. She forced herself up, blinking hard. Shadows closed in. Hands grabbed her. A rifle butt slammed into her ribs. She gasped but twisted, firing into the stomach of the man holding her. Pain shot up her side. A hand clamped over her mouth. She bit down, hard, copper flooding her tongue. She ripped free, firing again. Somewhere in the chaos, Markham shouted, "The elevator shaft, go." She saw it, a maintenance door half open at the far end. No cover 30 meters, a killing field. Her brain calculated instantly. 3 shooters covering the angle, 1 chance. "Run when I move," she hissed. Markham's eyes widened. "You'll never." "Trust me." She broke cover, sprinting, firing as she moved. Her first round dropped the left shooter. Second forced the right one to duck. The middle raised his rifle too late. Her third round split the air. He fell. "Go," she shouted. Markham stumbled after her, clutching the briefcase. Bullets chased them, whining past, slamming into concrete. They dove into the maintenance door just as another volley shredded the wall. Darkness swallowed them. The shaft yawned deep, metal ladder vanishing below. Olivia shoved Markham forward. "Climb." He hesitated. "What about you?" She glanced back. Shadows filled the doorway. Red dots danced on the wall. "Climb," she barked. He obeyed, boots clanging down the ladder. Olivia fired upward, covering him. 1, 2, 3 more men fell. Then her mag clicked empty. She dropped the sidearm, grabbed the ladder and slid down, palms burning, boots scraping. Shots cracked overhead, sparks raining. They hit the bottom hard, stumbling into a service tunnel. Markham gasped, clutching his chest. Olivia grabbed his arm, dragging him forward. The tunnel stretched into blackness, damp and endless. Somewhere behind, boots echoed. The Brotherhood wasn't giving up. They ran until their lungs burned, until the echoes faded. Finally, they collapsed against the wall, gasping in silence. Markham pressed the briefcase into her hands. His face was pale, streaked with sweat. "If I don't make it." "You will," Olivia cut him off. He shook his head. "If I don't, you have to take this, you have to show them. Promise me." She stared at the case, the weight of history inside it. Names erased, operations buried, orders signed in shadows. Proof her grandfather wasn't paranoid. Proof the women of Valkyrie had existed. Proof she wasn't alone. She closed her hand over the case. "I promise." Above them the city hummed with indifferent life. Cars rolled. Lights glowed. People lived, oblivious to the war fought in silence below their feet. Olivia wiped blood from her lip, throat raw, body aching. She looked at Markham, then at the case, then at the dark tunnel ahead. The Brotherhood had tried to erase her with bullets, with files, with silence. They had failed. And now, for the first time, she held the weapon they feared most. Truth. Why did truth feel heavier than the rifle ever had? The briefcase sat on the table in front of her, its metal edges dented from the garage fight. Senator Markham leaned against the wall, one arm in a sling, face drawn from exhaustion. Across from them, a single lamp lit the room, throwing long shadows. Inside the case lay everything: photographs, orders, bank transfers, directives signed by men whose names carried weight in Washington, a map of operations, red circles marking missions that had ended in convenient failure. At the heart of it, the Brotherhood, real, documented, unmistakable. Olivia's hands hovered over the papers. She had faced firefights, storms, death itself. None of it shook her like this, because a rifle had always offered clarity, one shot, one choice, one outcome. Truth offered no such certainty. Truth unraveled slowly, resisted violently, demanded sacrifice beyond blood. "They'll kill me if I testify," Markham said quietly. "But if I don't, none of this matters." Olivia lifted her eyes. His words mirrored her own fear. "They'll erase me, strip my record, bury my name, say I cracked, that I imagined it all." The silence between them was thick. Then Markham leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Then we make sure they can't erase us both." The decision came the next morning. Not at a podium, not in front of cameras, but in a secure Senate chamber with only 12 people present. Intelligence officers, 2 generals, a federal judge, and Olivia Reeves standing tall though her body ached with every bruise. She laid the files on the table. Her voice was steady, each word carrying the weight of her family's history. "My grandfather fought this war in silence. My father carried the scars of it, and now they've tried to erase me too, but the truth is here, and it's undeniable." The judge leaned over the files, scanning. Eyes widened, pens scribbled furiously, generals exchanged glances. The room's air shifted from skepticism to something else: fear. Because they knew what these pages meant. The Brotherhood was no longer rumor, no longer shadow. It had a name, a structure, a ledger. But even as realization spread, Olivia felt the danger tighten. Exposing them wasn't the end. It was the beginning of another war. 2 nights later, she left the chamber with no fanfare. No cameras, no parades. Markham disappeared into protective custody. The files vanished into classified vaults. And Olivia was given orders, quiet ones, a transfer, a temporary reassignment to an undisclosed location. She understood. The system had swallowed her proof. It would take years, maybe decades, before the Brotherhood's name was spoken aloud in public, if ever. She returned to her quarters, sat at her desk, and stared at the medal still resting beside her grandfather's journal. The medal glittered meaningless. The journal whispered its weight. Wars end when truth becomes undeniable. She wondered how many more years it would take. At dawn, she walked out onto the parade ground. Fog clung to the asphalt, muffling sound, softening edges. Soldiers moved like shadows, indifferent to her presence. She adjusted the strap of her pack, the Barrett case slung over her shoulder. Colonel Hayes waited for her near the flagpole. His eyes studied her with something between pride and sorrow. "You did it," he said. She shook her head. "No, I started it." He nodded, understanding. Sometimes that's all history needs, a beginning. For a long moment they stood in silence. The fog swirled, the flag above them stirring faintly in the breeze. Finally Hayes spoke again. "What will you do now?" Olivia looked east, where the sun was beginning to push against the fog. Her throat tightened, but her voice was steady. "I'll keep moving, keep watching, keep sending the bullet where it matters." Hayes offered a faint smile. "Then God help the one standing in your sights." She returned the smile, small, fleeting. Then she walked away. Not toward glory, not toward recognition, but toward the unknown, toward the fight still waiting in shadows. Her boots echoed against the wet pavement. Each step carried the memory of 15 brass casings, of a grandfather's journal, of women whose names had been erased but whose presence lingered. She carried them all. The world might never know their story, might never speak their names, but Olivia Reeves knew, and as long as she breathed, their truth lived on. At the gate she paused, glancing back once at Fort Braddock, the place where she had made the impossible shots, the place where silence had shattered. Her eyes burned, but her face was calm. She whispered softly, words only the fog could hear. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." Then she turned and walked into history,